Okay, good evening and welcome back to the Westborough Select Board meeting called here on Monday, October 3rd. We did open the meeting at 5:30 and entered into executive session. Now going back to our public session, and just to highlight that this meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed by Westborough TV, and thank you to them for that. So the first thing on the public agenda here is the memorandum of agreement between the town and police supervisors union. So I'm pleased to announce that during the executive session at the board's last meeting on September 27th, 2022, the board approved a memorandum of agreement between the town of Westborough and the Westborough Police Supervisors Association. This agreement amends the current collective bargaining agreement with effective dates of July 1st, 2019 and through June 30th of 2022. So that was the current agreement, and this amends it. So the following reflects the highlights of the successor agreement, which is effective July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. There are annual 2% cost of living increases effective July 1st of fiscal years 2023, 2024, and 2025. There was the addition of Juneteenth as a paid holiday. The annual clothing allowance will increase by $100 in year 3 of the contract to go from $1,400 to $1,500. So the first 2 years of the contract that will remain at $1,400, increase in the third year. Paid detail rates will increase to $55 per hour, and detail rates for labor dispute strike details shall increase to $100 per hour. And then there are 3 stipends which will increase from $300 to $750 per year. These include the Reserve Officer Supervisor Stipend, the Vehicle Maintenance Supervisor Stipend, and the Sex Offender Registry Supervisor Stipend. And each of these stipends are payable to just one officer. In addition to that, there were several items that were agreed to that are non-monetary language cleanup items for that agreement. So we approved that, as I said, during an executive session, and the Westborough Police Supervisors Association has agreed to that as well. So thank you to them. Thank you to our town manager and assistant town manager for negotiating, and we're happy to move that forward. And as we know that we do have a warrant article that will be updated with the requisite number that we need to raise an appropriate town meeting to cover this newly agreed upon contract. Any questions on that? Okay, moving forward on the agenda, this is next is discussion of acquisition of 0 Ruggles Street. Christy, I'll turn it to you.
So as I told the board at your meeting last Tuesday, was that we were awarded the land grant in the amount of $92,950 for the purchase of 0 Ruggles Street and other costs incidental to that, so survey costs, recording of the deed and such. Our conservation director received the grant materials last Tuesday, and included in the grant materials was a required land agreement that would require the town, if we were to accept the award, to transfer the entire parcel, all 15.42 acres, to the Conservation Commission. So it would be under the care and control of the Conservation Commission and protected under Article 97. Article 97 precludes the town from being able to put permanent structures on the property, to do grading, build roads, doing other sorts of things. There's some, it's really for the purpose of open space and passive recreation. As we talked about at previous meetings, we talked about the potential to divide that parcel into sort of 3 separate parcels, one being close to the Breen Road access, where that parcel would be under the care and control of the select board for the purpose of creating some parking and trailheads consistent with open space use. But then the other piece at the top of the parcel, where there's currently a water tower, we had talked about reserving about 2 to 3 acres for DPW for future potential use related to the water tower. So we did contact the state and ask the question if we were able to move forward with that plan, and they advised that that's not consistent with the use of the grant, And because the grant is based on the appraised value of the entire parcel, the town would have to choose not to accept the grant if we were to move forward with that divided parcel. So it's before the board today to choose whether or not you want to divide the parcel and not accept the grant, or if you want to accept the grant and move the entire parcel to conservation. So we have our conservation director here to answer questions about the use of that as a conservation piece, and then we also have our DPW director here to answer those questions.
Great. So I'll open up to the board for questions, comments, and I would like to hear from both Sherry and Chris. I think there are some questions too there. So
I guess if the entire parcel went to conservation, what are we allowed to do at the end of Green Street as far as, parking and changes? The particular concern would be ensuring handicap access, which usually requires some sort of managed pathway from a parking area into the parcel.
Sherry.
Hi. Oh, is this one on?
Yep.
It sounds on. Hi, Sherry Wittes, Conservation Director. So in Article 97, we can use the land with the intent that it was purchased. So if we had the intent of building a trailhead and some parking spots, we can do that. Anything that's ADA compliant, the state accepts because we're trying to make accessible to all venues. So they would be okay with us making the trailhead ADA accessible. If we chose to make any of the paths on the property ADA acceptable, I would imagine they would allow us to do that as well. I haven't formally asked that question, but if we were going to do them as stone dust, that's an allowed use. So as long as we weren't going to pave it, I believe they would allow us to do that.
Thanks. Other questions? I guess I had a question for Chris. Thank you for that question because it was mine. Chris, can you just talk about the top part of the parcel, the water tower? And I shouldn't say this because I don't know if it was illegal. I didn't see any no trespassing signs, but I did go up there this weekend, drove up the road, which is a tight grade, but just kind of looked around the space. But I'd love your thoughts about any planned uses or, we have some designs in there, but just your thoughts there.
My recommendation would be to partition a portion of the parcel and designate it for town use. And the thought behind that is, and we have no plans right now to do anything up there beyond what's the space allows that we currently operate within. But I think it was in the 80s when we put a new water tower up there. The previous pad, the old water tower sat on, we needed a bigger water tower, so we had a tower and we built another one next to it basically. To do that, we had to purchase, I don't know how we acquired the land, but I know we expanded the property that the town owned at the time by some amount. So our thinking is that, there's always the potential that down the road, it could be decades down the road that we need to do something in that space. I don't know what that would be. It could be a second water tower. It could be a new water tower. It could be some other thing the town needs. But it's key terrain for the town, and so I think our thought is that we should preserve a portion of that to allow us that flexibility in the future should we need it.
Thank you. Can you also talk, we did have in our packet that there is, and I couldn't really understand, but that we actually have some DPW easements around that property, not onto this new parcel, but there are easements that go through that, what I call the wayside pool, but that wayside recreation area.
So that's a stormwater easement. It's not really associated with the water tower site itself, but if you've been up there, it's on a hill. The less sloped portion of the hill is towards Wayside, and the rationale for creating the parcel as it is, if you've seen the picture of it, is if this is an if we ever needed access to the site, besides, and I'm talking vehicle access, besides the existing road that goes up that steep hill, it would probably need to come through that easement or in some form or fashion from that direction. So connecting that parcel to where that easement parcel is the idea. So this is totally just speculation, but we're just planning, anticipating what could happen down the road.
Chrissy, can you just pull up the easement slide?
Next one down, yeah. It's like red and purple. I'm assuming the red is the
Yeah,
easement.
that's what I presume, but, oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
I assumed it was the next page.
And the purple's trails, I take it?
Purple and blue, I was assuming were trails, I don't know. Even if those were easements too, they still, to get to that water tower, have to go through that piece of property.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, Chris, you were just saying, so where, on the picture, the northern portion there, where that comes from Wayside, that would be your, I guess, logical entry point if you had to kind of bring in equipment
yes.
besides through by the water tower
So
itself.
the way the draft kind of division of the property is written,
Yeah.
if you look at the water tower, the northern boundary line of the water tower, so it's, on the picture, maybe an inch above the,
Oh, sorry.
there we
Yep.
go.
She goes again.
I was helping.
You were.
So basically on that drawing, that red line would connect to town property,
Yep.
and depending on what's needed down the road, there's an option there. I don't know what that would be, but I'm just saying we preserve an option.
But as you look at what you described last time, right now, there really isn't, if you had to do the same thing that happened back in the 80s and build a new tower, even the same size, on that spot, we really don't have a space to,
So if you look where the tower is now, and then south of it, you can see the shape of a circle. That's an existing foundation. But basically in that spot is where our chlorine booster station, which is ARPA-funded project, which will be done next year, that's going in that spot. So we're going to use all of the space that's inside that fence right now, and there won't be anything left for any other structure or anything else we'd need inside that fenced-in area.
So
And the fence is pretty much on the property line.
So, first of all, I want to thank all those who are involved in getting the grant, because I know it's a lot of work, and we specifically asked for Sherry and team to pursue that. As much as it pains me to walk away from about $90,000, I'm very supportive of taking the property without dedicated conservation, dividing it as being presented here, A, B, and C. Obviously, the majority of it is designated for conservation, which was the intent of it, and connecting that to Dpw. But I think the benefit to the town of Parcel C and the value of that, as we look toward the future, would quickly be eclipsed, past the value of the grant. So I'm very supportive of Chris's comments, and I would move that we would not accept I'm not sure if this is the right motion, but not accept the land grant, and that we would purchase the funds out of go ahead.
So right now it's available funds. So we have enough money in sale of real estate. And then for the conservation portion, Walkup Robinson is meeting. They have not voted
we've
to.
asked them to.
So out of a combination of available funds.
Yeah, perfect.
Second, I'll second that.
Okay, thanks for that. Further discussion? Alan?
In support of what Shelby said, well, it's frustrating to walk away from 90,000 and disappointing that the state wouldn't prorate the grant. Given the need, just knowing where things are going with water, as far as drought, water supply in general, and even water quality issues, to me, the chance that at some point in the not too distant future that we would need additional storage or additional equipment or something at multiple locations through our water system is more of a probability than a possibility. And we would need the land, to do that. And so I agree with Director Payne's assessment that we should preserve that land for whatever possible use or unfunded mandate comes our way that requires modifications up there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's why I went up there this week. I think from the last meeting, I hate not using the money that we got for the grant. But I agree that I think it makes smart sense for us as a town. I think we would regret it down the road or potentially regret it. I do think, though, that in the short time, we could still utilize that property since we have no plans for it right now and put trails through there and allow it to be used. It's the town's going to own it. So from a passive recreation, we just reserve the right by making it town property. So it pains me to give money back. I am supportive. I think it makes the most sense for us in our role as a board to do that on behalf of the town. Anything else?
I would say I'm in agreement now. When we look at this, we're just talking about going back to the original suggestion, which I think was like 2.76 acres to
Yeah, if
the
you go back to this
DPW,
screen,
correct?
Yeah, so we have the-
So we're not giving so people understand, we're not giving the entire property to the DPW. We're giving
Right.
sort of a couple acres up top that they can use, but the majority will still go to conservation. It's just unfortunate that
Yeah,
then,
and I think we're going to keep parcel A as
Par-
well.
Right, so since dividing it at all would require us to not accept the grant, we had left parcel A on here just to give us some flexibility. But the intent, is still, I think, the trailhead and parking. You'll note, it's hard to read, but, all of them are noted as not being buildable lots.
gotcha.
So parcel A, would that, as it's being presented here, and I don't know if I have to amend the motion, would that allow us, though, to create a structure similar to like what we have over at Bowman, where there's
Yes,
so that's a structure on a pad?
yes.
Even if, okay.
Well, parcel A is staying under town control, so we
Right.
could actually,
So that would be an example of what, and why we would want to keep it under the M1.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
exactly. Just gives us that flexibility. Again, it's a small piece
Yep.
there.
Yeah.
While Chapter 97 land would still allow us to build trailheads and parking, this gives us a little more flexibility apart if we wanted to put some sort of structure, even I'm not saying we want to, but a
No,
pavilion, or
right,
similar to
right.
what we have at Bowman Conservation.
So I do see that parcel C is specific 2.76 acres, but the others are not. Will we have that for town meeting?
Yeah, this is just a draft. They were sort of waiting for the decision before they finalized it, but it actually has to go to the planning board tomorrow night, so,
Okay.
For an A&R, right?
Super.
for A&R, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to move forward with the 3 parcels as described, based on acreage to come, but in essence, basically to not accept the land grant. All those in favor? It's 5-0, 5 being present. With that, knowing what we are, why don't we go forward and vote on our support for Article 18, which is part of the next agenda item, if we want to. So is there a motion to support Article 18 as it will be presented based on this previous discussion?
So moved.
Seconded?
Any further discussion on that? Again, this is the one, Article 18 is the acquisition of 0 Rutland Street. All those in favor? So that's 5-0 of support for Article 18 on the warrant. Okay, next is Article 28. This was a question we had regarding this was a new ad there on the handicap parking fines. That we had received some information here. Fred, if you want to come up in case there's questions. If not, we're just giving you if there's no question, you still get the chance to stand and stretch.
Yeah, Fred Leonardo, Community Development Director. To be clear, I'm not on the commission,
Yep.
but I support them from technical advice. Bill Haslett actually serves as part of the commission.
So,
Perfect.
so I would move to, first of all, thank you for the letter. It gives us a sense of some of the ideas, and appreciate that. So
Sure.
I would move to approve, vote our support of Article 28 as presented in the warrant.
Second.
Seconded by Keo. Sorry, he beat you to it. Any further questions or comments? Not all those in favor? It's 5-0, 5 being present.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're gonna stay though, right? Okay. Okay, so, final thing on our agenda tonight is Article 30, and this is the, article to amend the purpose of borrowing reallocation of articles for the Hastings School HVAC to include the Hastings School ADA compliance improvements. And thank you, Amber, for providing us the letter, but,
So, thank you for inviting me back to keep talking.
I
Amber
know you're
Bach.
going someplace else after this. one
I
to talk
am,
about
I
the
am.
same
As soon as
thing.
I can warm up. You can pull out the errors and I can correct them before I end up at the other meeting. Amber Bach, 10 Arch Street, Superintendent of Schools. So you have that memo. Do you want me to project it as well? I'm happy to do
Sure.
so,
If you-
so that we can
Public can
make
see it
sure-
too, yep.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate, so I just need to fire it up here for a sec. Is Jeff gonna come out and come to thank
Here he
you?
comes.
Like Magic Man behind the
Magic
wall.
Man, right?
I love
That's his
that.
new nickname.
So
All right.
people call me Hurricane now, so.
Hey, that's funny. I haven't
You
thought
know,
of
at least
that
we can
mine.
all enjoy
that. Well, funny
laughing together.
that, not,
But not
right,
that.
yeah, not that.
All right. Let me just make this a little larger here. All right. So I think it was an important exercise. I appreciate the opportunity to come back here and discuss any additional questions. It was an important exercise for me to kind of go all the way back. And, you know, I don't know the construct of all the things you might have wanted in a memo, but this was as much an exercise for me as it will be for the school committee when I give it back to them and to the planning board. And I think, you know, I wanted to kind of codify the process of all the things that have happened at Hastings and try to boil it down to a fairly concise set of, you know, a memo. And I have to say, it's literally hot off the presses. So Leah and I have a couple differences in a few of our numbers. And so I'll make sure that, you know, I double check that with her. We often, you know, again, like I went back and pulled them from the warrant and when I'm looking that far back. And again, some of our motions might have been amended for adjustments on the floor. So I just say that, and I think I looked at her notes, but I decided instead of like changing a few things at the last minute, I was gonna work off of what I have. I'll step you through it and we'll answer questions. So again, to skim through this and then we'll dive into questions. We have been in a shared commitment to maintain all the buildings in our community, town and school buildings. A great amount of successful work has been done at Hastings, and it's a much improved building than where it was several years ago. And we knew at the time in collaboration when we withdrew from the accelerated repair project to do doors, windows, and roof in 2018, that we would have those issues remaining and would need to then tackle them over time. This memo kind of attempts to give you a picture of the history, and if you're new to the committee or, you know, had missed kind of the phase, it's been probably our most complicated project to track. For those of you who have been along for the journey, in 2015, we did a comprehensive enrollment plan, and in that process made decisions around each of our buildings to expand and absorb the growth in enrollment in the town, while we also tried to capture the best opportunity to upgrade buildings, you know, in the sliding scale of opportunity that made the most sense. And when we looked at the Hastings building at the time, the decision in a nutshell related to the pre-K3 expansion and enrollment project was to build the sister standing school of the preschool, pick up some interior space, do some modest renovations in the interior, and reconfigure space to gain floor space and classrooms inside the building. You might have forgotten at the time that we took out 2 very decrepit modules, and with the reconfiguration, we're then able to pick up space and make sure that those didn't continue to kind of haunt us in the way they were declining. We then absorbed a project related to the geothermal system because the process of the existing maintenance related to the heat exchangers had far exceeded their natural life. Again, I want to give a shout out to the geothermal system there, really having served us well. It was highly innovative when it was done, and has always been a project that we're really proud of. So we replaced that system. And when we replaced the geothermal system, it surfaced the beginning discussions around HVAC upgrades being part of the complete circulatory system of a building. So the HVAC runs the heating and cooling using the geothermal, and then you're of course pushing it through all the vents and the unit HVAC systems that circulate and deliver and keep that air circulating. And so we started looking at the HVAC as a component of a system, as a complete system that would need to be upgraded. At the time that we built the geothermal, there was a circular discussion that I think you'll remember, where they thought we might need to expand the storage space for the geothermal area in order to house the equipment. And it started this discussion around triggering the sprinklers and the space and whether or not it tripped code issues. At the time, we ended up being able to withdraw and do redesign to kind of avoid some of that. And we didn't need to have any of that trigger happen because we didn't build any of that additional space. But it gives you a small snapshot, and with a small change really to floor space, it kind of ignited a larger discussion for us around the cost of the building and the number of repairs we were trying to do, and then when that might trip code. So the cost and extent of repairs needed moved us into the accelerated repair project with the MSBA, which we were accepted into, where we would have received, I think it was close to $9 million, actually a little over $9 million, to do doors, windows, and roof. Seems like a number we're fond of now when we're looking at the numbers that we're facing. But at the time, then our contribution would have picked up the package of all of that work. We thoughtfully working together with Drew from that project, recognizing we would then need to pick up other types of repair over time. We then came in and at that time did the fire alarm system and the sprinkler system in a series of warrant articles. And you can see Leah and I cross-referenced because I knew I had a gap in the funding, and she and I picked up the other 2 articles. And those 3 worked on the composite of completing all of the sprinkler work, which we have now completed and is gone through its inspections and is complete. There's currently, I think, $42,000 or so left in that particular package of funds, but that again is stuff that they'll use for maintenance and inspections and other things, and hold what's remaining in that package. At that time, we also, in the summer of 2021, filled in the recessed floor cavity area that was part of the original Hastings design, which just became antiquated and caused us many more kind of management problems with kids and wheelchairs and space than really we could hold on to, and we repaired that out of maintenance budget, having planned for it at $42,000. That becomes relevant because those numbers start to trigger the 30% over the total cost of the building. That then leads us to the area where we start to have some code issues. So that left us with the remaining project of the roof and the windows and the HVAC. And now, as we've brought forward to you the ADA, and as you see called out in Fred's memo as well, ADA interacts with the MAAB, and it's like the 521, what's the actual number, Fred? I can't remember. Code. Those 2 are the 2 interactive codes that have to do with accessibility. So having withdrawn those items, we circulated the roof repair into the capital plan, which you've seen now since its trajectory of 2018, and it kind of escalated from an early priority 3 up to a priority 1. And then when we had the emergency roof issue at Armstrong, we cycled Hastings roof out of the ARPA repair back into the capital cycle and did the emergency repair of the Armstrong roof. That leaves you with two cost figures, which you've heard us discussing. Garland Roof had originally given us the 24 million for the updated, for the work.
2.4 million,
Sorry,
not 24.
sorry, 2,400,000, sorry. I'm moving quickly so you don't get stuck with me too long. And after we did that, the upgraded cost estimates that he's given us at a $45 per square foot accounting for inflation is 3,600,000 currently.
So
That's current as of September 9th, I think. It's in our documents.
So I'm gonna just refer to that
Sure.
as roof worst case scenario, 3.6 million.
Current dollars.
Current
Rough
dollars.
order of magnitude a year later. That's what, yeah. I mean, Garland Roof has been a good, stable framework for us. He's very good. He lives in town, and he's really respected in the field. And he is up on our roof of all of our buildings, working with our repair and our maintenance people, and then some subcontractors we use to maintain our roofs. And he's the gentleman you met who was really spot on with us working for the Armstrong roof. So the HVAC project then is the other piece of the project that we had moved forward on. And we had two current articles, and these are the ones that we're discussing, seeking to expand the scope to allow us to move forward with accomplishing the ADA work so that we can kind of unlock the opportunity to keep working. So those two warrant articles, there was an original Article 10 in 2019, and then cost estimates and early design estimates with the engineers led us to come back and seek additional funds of the $1,835,327, which you see there. And those are the two packages of funding that are sitting currently that we can't access unless we expand the scope and manage the ADA. And then you also see I did attach some documents for you, and there's the most current, and that's of September 8th, I think, or September 22nd, the updated project design costs that they're tracking as we kind of continue to move forward. So the part that I think we wanted to look at, and the money's down below, but the escalation of the cost from the substantial replacement for the HVAC and the roof leave us in a cycle where even if we wait for the 3-year cycle where some funding can fall off, these numbers are automatically going to cycle us back into a trigger of being over the $6.5 million that is the 30% of, you know, what the cost of the building is estimated at. So it means, as we said earlier, that the ADA MAAB code compliance becomes the primary focus of completion in order to then be able to complete repairs on the HVAC and eventually the roof and windows. So one of the questions, you know, is kind of like what work has been done. You can see here, I put the estimated value of the building as it was last provided when we had to do our last assessments. And then you have the work that's been done in the building over the past 36 months. And those are starting to fall away. The interior reno should fall away. And you see that we've spent roughly the $3.5 million in terms of interior work. So we've had multiple people look at this and look at the code triggers and look at the documentation. The code requirements have been reviewed. The town building inspector had hired a complete comprehensive MAB review of all town buildings, actually, led with your vote, and Christy is planning, working with Fred, and that document's attached for you. It's like a 600-page light reading document of the Hastings Access Survey Report. And GGD, the engineers, did a crosswalk against ADA requirements and the MAAB requirements and gave us initial assessments over what we had to accomplish in order to kind of check the box on all code compliance issues. So certainly the town building department assessment was effective in giving us really an in-depth, list of areas that we needed to consider. And then GGD did a good dive into cross-referencing a crosswalk of all the codes. They also did a more current walk down of the building again and surveyed all the areas so that they could provide the rough order of magnitude of some of the numbers that we've been providing in their estimates to move forward. So I attached a variety of documents there for you that just show you the level of work that has been done to kind of track ensuring that we're doing careful compliance on what has to be done there. And the consultants who have done the same internal engineering work on the sprinkler work and also with the HVAC work and other work in the district have a really good handle on kind of what the inner workings of the interior functions of Hastings look like. We also did a rough order of magnitude on the windows, give an account of windows and current costs to give you some sentiment, kind of general awareness of what it would cost to potentially do the windows. That's down the road, and I'm sure that number would be different, but we included it in here trying to be comprehensive. So where does that bring us? The two articles, and Leah has a different number on the 3 million, so I'll have to reconcile that with her this week. But I mean, regardless, the number is the number, and we'll make sure that we know what that total is. The number that you wanted from us was kind of what is the expenditure to date, and you see that expenses tracked against those articles is the 233,715, which actually is paid for a lot of the documentation and work that you see attached. Leaving currently, roughly 4,000,006, although if I follow Leo's number, it's closer to 4 million total available. And their warrant requests are asking you to allow us to expand the scope to pick up the ABB design costs, which they're estimating at the 438, which is 12% of the design costs that they're currently carrying. And then completing work in their rough order of magnitude on the date quoted from 7/8 would be roughly 3,650,000. And I guess in summary, the expansion of the scope would allow us to complete design scope to produce biddable drawings to go out to bid to establish a true cost of each of the component pieces of the HVAC and the ADA work. And accessibility to these funds would allow us to keep the project moving forward to accomplish these pieces that we're going to have to do. At some point, the roof's going to have to be repaired as a composite piece of the scope of the HVAC or as an emergency repair if we follow a trajectory of concern. When we talked about Armstrong, that Adam thought that Hastings was kind of right behind it, but a little less degraded because its drainage issues had been better. So that is the update, and I guess I would open it up to discussion and questions.
So I'll start off. So thank you for pulling all this information together in such a short period of time. Just so folks understand. So in essence, pretty much by repurposing this, HVAC is gone, basically. And we're going to use all the HVAC money to design and do I'll call it ADA compliance or 501, whatever, accessibility requirements.
Yeah.
Which is.
Yeah, I mean, in summary, yes. I mean, I think, again, within scope, as you move forward in these real pricings and bids, you can come in an advantageous place or not, and you just have to keep moving forward. Accessibilities to the funds lets us keep moving. We might well be able to, again, pick up the consolidated design of the HVAC as well and get a hard number. But if you just work off of the numbers we're carrying, you're looking at the roof and the HVAC. The roof number's sitting at 5.2 million right now. No, the roof number, hang on, I'm just gonna move my documents.
3.6.
Yeah, you've got 3.6 for the roof and 5.2 for HVAC as most current cost.
Right.
So, again, but I think when you're looking at these size numbers, until you go out to bid and you get those back, what you want is a hard design that you can take out, but that doesn't age once you get it. Like your design bid stays good, you're not gonna lose on that. But any of the rough order of magnitude work ages from the minute you do it. So, with these dollars, if we get a design, if we can do some of the design work continued on the HVAC, which they've done some of, then you get the opportunity to have really biddable documents that give us a hard number to look at the next step beyond where we are.
Okay, other questions?
Some questions?
Yeah.
The original MSBA accelerated repair program was for the exterior envelope, windows, doors, and roof. We did the door work, correct?
We did some of
Some
it,
of it.
not all of it, no. It would have
So-
to be done over time. I don't know that the doors are at a level, some of the doors would have to be upgraded during the ADA work, so you're gonna get some of that. And the doors were allowed to be encompassed in the envelope work, so you would do them and they're costed out. The major area of need really centered on the roof and the windows when you looked at that envelope repair.
So, not knowing the rules of this program, and I see Mr. Doretta's here, if we move forward with the expanded scope and start the design work and begin executing on the ADA and accessibility requirements, is there the potential for reapplying for accelerated repair for the windows and roof? Or, like we heard from the library, if we don't take the grant, we go to the bottom of the list, it could be 3 decades before we come up the list again. If a zoning article is voted down, it can't be brought up again for so many years. Are there rules about having withdrawn from the program?
No,
and
that's a
how long
good
we have to
question.
wait before we can reapply?
So the rapid repair process is a separate pool of money and a separate trajectory than the MSBA process. They are kind of sister programs. And it moves more quickly because they do have a set pool of money annually that they utilize to putting against that. It's been, even in the cycle of years, we could certainly reapply and look at it. It might match up in the trajectory of the workload. I can't remember how quickly we moved. We moved pretty quickly before. The SOI that we did was, pulled together and pushed out. And it's a chunk of work, but we could certainly, I'm very open to bringing it back to school committee to say, do we cycle back in and see if we can do that?
What's that?
Steve?
Yes, Steve. Can you just, sorry, we'll get complaints if you don't go on microphone.
Yeah, one of the problems, and this is the reason why we pulled out, was first of all, the MSBA has certain criteria, of which one of the things is a very, very large contingency that they require you to include in the cost. And therefore, when we got the grant, we had to raise and appropriate or borrow that total amount. At the time, we thought what we were going to be doing didn't require such a large amount of contingency, and therefore, we thought we could do it cheaper. And at the time, we probably could have. The other piece of the scope was that, in fact, there were certain things that were excluded from that total that would not have been funded by the MSBA. And the third piece was that the reimbursement rate was much, much lower than what we had experienced on Gibbons. So when you rolled all that stuff together, it wasn't necessarily beneficial to the town to use it for the rapid repair. However, as Amber said, there's no reason why we couldn't reapply, and they understood that at the time, that we could come back and ask again. But as you know from what we've done now at Gibbons and at Fales, it's a highly bureaucratic process. And it requires, the fact we had an OPM, that we had a construction manager, and that we had, if you will, a very large piece of the total pays for those guys. And we thought with a roof, as we did at Armstrong, that we didn't need to have all that baggage, if you will. And for what we're doing so far for these pieces, we haven't needed that baggage either. What we really have been is caught in the web of inflationary spiral. And as Amber said, one of the things about what we would get if you allow us to use the money to get the ADA design, once that design is on the table and once the design for the HVAC is on the table, that doesn't change. Certainly the bid for it as we go later would change, but that money is well spent. It would be something we could use even if the drawings were, a few years old. And so, as Amber said, if we can't get the design done, we can't get a fixed price to build the work. And therefore, the town meeting would know, we would be still floating estimates without a real number. And as you had last year discussed when we were discussing what was added to the package, until we bid it and until we can put the guys to work, we don't really know what that number's gonna be. One of the things that is out there, as we heard when we were talking about Armstrong, was in the first, 2 months of this year, inflation hit us for 20% increase in the cost. And the only way we can make sure at the best answer we can get is the final bid for this work to take to town meeting so they know what it's gonna cost them. And until we get the design drawings and the specifications to bid, we're still out there wondering what the real total is going to be. So obviously, we're hopeful that this request would be granted not only by and recommended by the Board of Selectmen, and we hope the Finance Committee as well, but put before the town as the way to get to the end of these projects at Hastings with what the real cost will be for the town. So as you know, from looking at this, Amber did an awful lot of work to come up with the history of this thing. And hopefully, the next couple of pieces aren't going to be as difficult.
And so this is my ignorance here, but, so just a minute, that, what we had in the package for the cost estimate for the HVAC, that's not a design document, that's just a,
It was the engineer's
Wrong?
estimate.
Okay.
No, it was the engineer's estimate at the time, based on what they saw as the scope. One of the things that has changed is that the scope of work for that is that the roof at Hastings is much like the roof that was at Armstrong, which is, it was just a roof. There was very little structural capability to carry any additional loads, even snow load became an issue. So what's in this design now is local reinforcement of the structure to support the RTUs on the roof. Because what we're doing in this design is eliminating the unit ventilators in the rooms and going to RTUs on the roof to do that, quote, ventilation. So bottom line.
but the number we had, that was like an 8/5/22 document at the 5.182 million. So that is,
Yeah, that's a real
Updated.
engineer's estimate, but it isn't a bid document.
it's not a bid document, so that would be the next piece.
Right.
Design is to get a true
Yeah.
bid document.
I mean,
not-
bottom
okay.
line, as you see with this thing on the ADA, is the engineer's cost, if you will, to do the design is about 12% of the total. And so if you take 12% of the 5.2, that's roughly $500,000, and we've only spent $200,000 to get to where we are today.
Okay.
So that answers the question of what are we really talking about here? Roughly a total of $500,000 for the Hastings HVAC and the $428,000, which gets us up to $1 million out of the total that's been authorized so far.
Great, thanks.
And
Alan,
then-
sorry.
I guess my other question with the work, the scope of work to complete the ABA, MAAD work, rough order of magnitude, that 3.65 million, that's worst case. If I recall in our prior conversation, you mentioned that during the design phase, there's also a discussion of scope and prioritization of work.
Well, and hopefully, and you're talking about the 3.6 million for
I mean,
the,
I remember.
Talking about for the
I don't remember the,
No,
no, I'm talking about
the
the
ADA.
ABA.
oh, right, right, right.
$3,650,792.
But that's inclusive of absolutely everything in the report at this point, but
Right.
I think I recall with the Forbes building, there was
There it is, sorry, I
An
didn't
issue
scroll down, I
Thank you.
apologize.
where technically the water fountain sticks out with
You can go
3/4
for
of an inch too
appeals.
far. But it was determined that the hallway's wide enough that it doesn't create a hazard, so we didn't have to rip it out and move it in 3/4 of an inch and, you know, that costs.
Yeah, they're definitely,
Railing height of 1/8
yeah.
of an inch, so.
Yeah, you can apply for waivers.
And
We
so-
we got waivers for those.
So we can get, so we could,
You can't not do them, but
this
you
is,
can apply for
this
waivers.
number's assuming we haven't applied any for any waivers.
Right, and certainly
modified
when
scope.
they get to design, you get an opportunity to come in and if there was an area, like for example, they know they were gonna seek a waiver on the lift composite for a different structure that would be more cost advantageous at Hastings, because they will have to add a lift on that at the stage in the cafetorium. So they already had mapped out areas where they were doing, when they were doing rough order of magnitude, where they would try to seek some waivers, that one being an example. But typically, then they would be working, we'd be working with Fred and Bob Ferguson and the team of engineers to basically iron that all out, heading into biddable documents.
You typically need an architect or an engineer to
Right.
submit waivers.
Yes, and we have both.
So, but that would be part of the design work, would be
Right.
determining
Right.
waivers and applying for those.
So both the architects and have walked down the project, and they're the people that are providing the, you know, the estimates that have come forward. So, I mean, I think they can see accurately, and their rough order of magnitude is pretty scoped out.
Sheldon?
Yeah, couple questions. I think this first one actually is for our building commissioner. Just to confirm from the memo we received that, like, the accessibility improvements and changes can't be phased in. This is my lay interpretation. They can't be phased in, so we can't start the HVAC work with the understanding of, yep, we've got a 600-page report and we've got to do these things with a plan to put them in. They have to precede all this other work. Is that a correct statement?
Fred Lenaro, Community Development Director. Well, sort of. So you have to hit the plateaus. So if you're not touching the specific elements, so for instance, the HVAC, that's not an addressable item, it's a repair item. So you're not affecting accessibility for the HVAC system.
Okay.
So if you don't hit both the plateaus of over the 500,000, which obviously you can blow by,
Right.
but the 30% fair market value, then no, they don't have to technically update the building.
Okay.
So if you were to just take each item individually that had been addressed, I'm assuming that the 20 million plus
Yep.
was whatever, I don't know where that number came from, but let's assume that's the
Yep.
fair market value.
Yep.
So the 30% was that $6-point-something million. So when you hit that threshold, with any of the repair projects that go over 500,000, that's when you'd have to be compliant to MAAB.
Okay, thank you.
So, your question is
No, that's a
saying,
correction. No,
Okay.
that
And
is
it's a
clear.
3-year,
over a 3-year look back. So the initial renovations actually happened when I first came to town, sort of. So they're past the 3 years, as far as I can tell. We issued C of Os on the interior renovation. That's where we kind of got into that whole conversation of when you'd have to hit compliance with accessibility.
Yeah.
So the doorways, interestingly enough, they did do a few of the doorways, like the main entrance, there was an office space. Those were compliant at the time they did the renovation, as I recall. So they had to do that because they were doing that work.
Right.
That's why the thresholds get confusing a little bit.
Sure.
But everything they've talked about tonight, as far as I can seem to figure out, would be considered repairs. The windows are repair, the doors would be repairs, the HVAC, those are repairs, they wouldn't be a construction project.
But it's still gonna trip that threshold.
if you put it all together.
If you put them all together, but individually, I mean, you could screw around with this for the next 20 years and not,
And, yeah, and we'd be, yeah, right.
right, I mean,
But then
that's,
again, we also want our buildings to be accessible.
Oh, yeah. No, I know. I mean, it's, again, you know, it would be great to be able to just do everything and we
Right.
could afford it all. But obviously, we made a conscious decision back in 2017 to stagger this work, or 2018, so.
yeah, so another way of looking at that, if it was important to repair the roof now, you probably could do that without tripping the accessibility requirement. So you have to pick when you want to do this,
Right, but then
basically.
there's the whole, like, you do the HVAC work and then you do the roof, so there's, you know,
Right.
even that work in and of itself, as I've talked with Mr. Durrett, that has to be, you know, yeah, okay. you
There's a,
did-
there's a timing there, and one other clarification
Yeah.
I may, if I'm standing here. The MAAB, what you'd be actually asking for is variances.
Okay.
So I'll give you an analogy. At the Forbes building, the architect was fortunate enough to apply for several different variances. Past experience, generally if they're close to code compliance, but they might be off by an increment of a half an inch or an inch, and it's an existing condition, one that wouldn't present, you know, an outlandish type of thing. And I'll give you an example. The handrails next door at the Forbes will be off in some places by a half an inch or an inch. They weren't, in the overall scheme of things, they're not off enough that somebody would likely get injured as a result of that. So it's a judgment call by that commission, the Mass Architectural Access Board, to make a call on whether they grant that variance or not. So it really depends on what the architect will look at, or the engineers, on what variances they apply for. But those aren't, they're not given out like candy, let me put it that way, so.
Yeah, and we didn't get all of them.
We,
On the Forbes.
no, we didn't get them all next door. We did get, you know, a few of them.
Thank you.
Sure.
So one thought I had as I was looking at this, and I would certainly benefit from Amber or Steve's thoughts around the timing of this, would be, does it, you know, is the ask at this town meeting for some amount, expansion of scope, I understand why that needs to happen, but specifically for the design cost as it relates to the MAAB? In that it kind of says, we've got to do this work, we know it's got, you know, it's not covered in the scope, so we have to, that's why this is before you, and, but yet we don't have a number. So rather than saying to the town, you know, to taxpayers, we're asking you to authorize 4 million and change for some project we know we've got to do, but we don't have a bid in hand, a portion of that, you know, whether it's 500,000 or, I don't know, whatever the number, whatever we feel like would cover us for design costs, that's the ask. And then there's a second request in the spring. I don't know how long the design work would take for the actual authorization for the work. I mean, it just, you know, when I think about other projects that we've done, consistently we say, what's the project going to cost? And then the bid process is, it's contingent upon town meeting approval.
We get the design.
And we get the design.
First.
Now, I certainly want to understand the timing and any impact to that, you know, kind of
Yep.
thought.
So first of all, the way
Actually,
the
when you're
article.
doing that, can I just, sorry, Steve, just to add, maybe it will come into your answer as well, because I guess to what Fred just said, if we think that a lot of this is rolled off and we say this, is there the potential that we could continue with the HVAC project, which was what this was approved for, and not trip the 30% on total valuation because other things have fallen off, and then knowing that if we go in before the 3 years to get the roof, which it sounds like we may have to do, but that would be the trip to do the ADA, but we go back to town meeting specifically for the ADA compliance. So that was just a second part of the question.
Well, I guess a backwards way to answer your question is perhaps the 5.2, if it stood alone, wouldn't trip the 30%. But the problem with the 5.2, until we finish the design work for that and get the bid, we don't know what that number is. And so we're still exposed to whatever that number turns out to be relative to the 6 million. The other side of what we're actually asking for here is the authorization to, in effect, spend out of the current pot of money, which we've, you know, demonstrated how much we have, 428,000, whatever that number was, to finish the design work for the ADA. That's what we're asking for. All the decisions that have been listed by Shelby are all on the table to be decided by town meeting. And the answer to the timing to get to that point is we would have these answers by the town meeting next year, annual town meeting. And in fact, we got that answer from the team on the 22nd of September. So we're right there, and the timeliness of this town meeting for this request for the authorization to finish the ADA design is pregnant, so that in fact we can answer the question the town is asking, well, how much? And how much for each? which means we could put them both on the table and schedule that bid so that we have an active, viable bid in hand in the month between, a month before town meeting and town meeting, because we can't go forward until the town votes the money anyway. So if the town did not vote the money, then we don't execute the bid.
Okay, so that was my misunderstanding, so I thought that what we were asking here was to expand it for all the ADA work, in essence.
Well, if you look at your totals, we can't do it with the estimate we have. We're short.
No, we could do it.
We can get a bid, but we can't build it.
But you could,
Well, you
if the
could.
estimate that
It's
we have today
3.6.
at 3.6 plus the design would fall under what we have available
Right.
with that article.
If it did, yeah, if it did.
So,
I'm
would
not-
you be
I'm not
okay, from what
putting
I'm
it-
hearing though, would you be okay if we modified it to say basically that we expand the purpose just to pay for design work? Which I
Design.
think was your,
Right, I guess that's.
to come back to the March town meeting with a good number in
Yeah,
hand.
well.
And it may be then that we'll still have a lot of money in those.
Yeah, and that's a decision you could make at that time, which is, okay, we got enough money to do it, here's the bid. You know, and town meeting says,
So will
yeah,
that
go
bid,
ahead.
will that bid have, is that just an ADA?
No, we're gonna do two separate bids, one for the HVAC design and one for the ADA.
Okay, and we already have a firm price on the roof as well?
No, you have Garland's estimate.
Okay,
We don't know any of these things in terms of what would be the final dollar
yeah,
So I guess
for
so,
each one.
And you can't.
I know where you're going with this.
You
so no, I'm just trying to follow along with the
Yeah.
plan here. So,
so
you just,
HVAC can already be, sorry,
no,
HVAC can already be done under the, to go to design, they can do that today, that's already been approved.
yeah,
But it can't be done because of all the other things we've been talking about.
right, I understand, I got all that. So I just want to take, I want to,
Dollar-wise.
Yeah,
I wanna
it's a
ma-
catch-22.
I want to, yeah, I get it. You need to get the ADA done before you can, it makes total sense to me. So you come back to town meeting next year, you've got a design plan in for the ADA that we've now spent $438,000 on. It says the money for for the ADA, is going to cover, our
So
estimate
much.
right now is $3.6 million, but it could be a little bit more than that based on that design. Or it could be less based on
Yeah, we hope.
whatever variances and whatnot we get. Makes total sense. But is the plan to come back with a all-in figure at that time to say, in order to get the roof done, the HVAC system, and the ADA all done, we're coming back to town meeting in the spring with an all-in number to get all of those done because we've hit the trigger, so go get the whole pot? Or is the plan to come back and say, we know what our ADA number is, we want to go do that first, then we're going to come back to town meeting the following year, or maybe whatever is appropriate, and hit HVAC, because we know that we've spent our pot of money right now on ADA, and then work backwards to roof eventually. Is that the
Well,
thinking?
I
Or-
think all those options are on the table at that point, because at that point, we would know, we would have a bid in hand, based on the scenario I just gave,
Mhm.
for the HVAC.
Okay,
We would also have a bid in hand for the ADA.
yeah,
We would have the best estimate from Garland at that point in time, based on the industry standard for the roof. Okay? At that point, now you pick and choose. You're in the candy store, you pick and choose what you want to do.
yeah.
And in my opinion, that's the best option for the town, to figure out what it needs to get at that time with the money we have.
I'll just say that I'm a little worried. I get I think it was $1.2 million increase that we're talking about on HVAC, but if you look at Garland, the increase on the Garland roof project went up by 50%.
Well, yeah.
So in theory, the HVAC, because of today's markets, things could go up, who knows, 50%.
Well, they
also.
could, and that's the reason why we need the firm bids in hand. in
Yeah, I'm
order
just
for
trying to
the
get it
town
out there that the
Yeah.
reality of the situation for
But
people.
we do have the rough order of magnitude, it went from roughly 4.8 to 5.182 based on, for the
Right, but that-
HVAC on the
That's a
A5,
20%, right?
Right.
which is the same timing as the Garland one.
Right, but I'm just saying Garland, well,
I guess,
yeah,
I guess my,
You don't know till you go to design.
exactly, yeah.
I guess my suggestion would be potentially to consider that the change in scope be design work for ADA, HVAC, roof, and windows, because then we would have not only the next set of projects that we're all talking about in the interdependency with respect to triggers and ADA, but hopefully the information we would need for any state funding for any of these projects going forward.
Well, and to your point around windows, is I could be wrong, but I mean, the HVA, part of the HVAC units sit below or connected to many of the windows, right?
Well,
Am I-
they will.
They're going away.
And
That's what we're removing.
They're going away and we'll brick in those openings.
Right, but to Alan's point, if you're thinking about kind of design work, and they're, I mean, unless you're gonna put, I don't know, some cinder blocks in there and call it a day and then replace the windows, like, the window design work to me is pretty integral to the HVAC design.
We don't know that.
And even if it's not,
Well, as,
I guess.
based on my strong construction experience, Steve, I'm saying it's very relevant.
Well, I
It's just logical what you're saying.
You know, I mean, we're talking
You
about
don't-
what ifs, we're talking about what ifs, and the
My
story is,
CDL, which
let's
is my
get a
construction
couple of things
design
nailed down
license.
so we can answer the rest of them, that's all.
Yeah, I think in the concern, if I'm capturing it correctly, is the way this is worded, you could go forward with making these ADA changes without coming back to the town.
Yeah.
You could get the bid and then just go ahead and do the work if it was within the amount you have.
Yeah,
And
it's
we're
the-
saying we really
yeah.
want you to just do the bid and then come back.
You mean if approved, you're saying?
Right.
You're saying
As
way
the
it's-
language as it is right now, they could just get the
We
bid
could
and
make
then
the
do
motion
the work.
different.
Right. So that's the ask we're coming back with.
But, and I guess my view is if we're gonna focus just on getting the numbers, that we should, as
Get
much
all
as
the numbers.
possible,
Get them all.
get bids for all of the outstanding
Yep.
projects. Because it not only informs town meeting as far as come March, is there enough money in the current borrow to finish the ADA work? Excellent. When and how, the amount and when for the HVAC,
And the
system.
roof and the windows.
But then, I think it opens up, I assume MSBA wants the best numbers possible.
Well, we would have to
For
apply the
program.
MSBA for all of these things to have that included between now and town meeting. So,
Yeah, but I guess my point, but
But you
my
mean
point is-
annual town meeting?
annual time, you
Yeah,
would
yeah.
need that information, so.
Right.
Getting bids not just on ADA and HVAC, but roof and windows,
But the accelerated repair wouldn't pay for HVAC, and it wouldn't pay for ADA.
but it
I don't
would
believe.
do.
I
it
think
would
you're
do-
correct.
What's that?
Only because we're in the middle of a design that isn't an award under their auspices.
They won't
Yeah.
do it, but at least.
They'll do the
Wait,
envelope.
wait, sorry, you guys, they won't do what?
They only do the envelope, they won't do.
They
the-
wouldn't include it in an MSBA grant because it's not following their rules. In other words, if you already have a design by an architect, okay, that hasn't been reviewed by the MSBA in Boston, then in fact, we don't have anything, right?
So we can't bring them our design work and get their input and,
I don't believe we could. I mean, who knows, but they've got
Okay.
many other,
okay, based on your experience,
clients.
it's not viable.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is a difficult story. We got into this box of having to spend this amount of time discussing this stuff because we didn't do it and get a firm bid and go to the town meeting. Because every time we turn around, estimates went up. And the more it was delayed, the more it cost. And, we're both offering to the town an opportunity to nail this down so you know what it really costs by virtue of letting us finish the design for both of these things. Put together a design package and bid it, and present that number to the town meeting to then decide.
Yeah, I would be, I mean, I'm supportive of the design work. What I am I'm hung up in, the way it's currently worded, is it's not, meaning the article, is not specific to design work. It's very general, it says.
But the motion could be.
No, right.
I
So
think,
I'm
I'm
just-
looking at Christian
I'm
that way,
just
that we
saying,
could make
like-
the motion to limit,
Yeah.
it wouldn't expand it, it would limit it, then it's only
Right,
design
right.
work.
And
Which I think the
so-
way we'd do that now, we'd have to do it that way.
Right,
But
right.
could
because
we-
it's
Can't change the
closed.
article.
Right. So I guess, right, no, and that's fine. I guess, so I'm saying I'm supportive of, I'm just thinking about kind of, again, past discussions on this project and others, that I think that town meeting would be supportive of. Go do the design, pay for the design, come back with firm bid or bids in hand, and then, that proceeds down a different path.
Yeah, because at that point, right now, we're only asking for, in essence, a change in scope to that article at this point for roughly $500,000 to do design work for the ADA piece, because you can already go to get design work. We don't have to ask for anything on HVAC, that's already approved to go to do
Yep.
that. This is just that,
Right.
extending it to that piece, which I'm much more comfortable doing that and coming back, as Steve said, with firm numbers to the annual town meeting and say, okay, town meeting, there's still money left, we're still
Right.
gonna have a big chunk of money left in those articles, but what do you wanna do?
Yeah,
And it gives us more time to think about
And,
it as well.
and I guess I would ask that we adjust the number to allow for the design work for the roof and the windows, so that, if the rough order magnitude of the windows is $450,000,
yeah, we talk about another
And
40
then
grand.
we're doing
Yeah.
the
For that
HVAC
opportunity.
work where we're disrupting the outside envelope of the building that touches the windows today. It may be better to do both those projects.
No,
as one.
I agree, Alan,
And-
with the
and-
design work.
And leaving, and being able to make that decision, but without a bid for the windows, we wouldn't be able to even consider that as an option.
I,
Yeah,
I agree with
so-
you on that, Alan, as well. But I might have completely missed this, but did I misunderstand that because of MSBA, we can't do that because the bids didn't, or the design work didn't go through them? Are you saying we create all that design work, then we submit it through MSBA?
No,
That's
they-
what I
they
thought you
won't-
said,
They won't
so-
approve it because what happens for, quote, the
That's what I thought you
architect's
said, so
approval,
that won't
and
work.
the, and
But
the
if-
engineer's approval is reviewed by them as to who they will allow you to get it from. And in fact, it fails, they gave us a choice, I guess, of 3, and we picked 3, one of 3, and then they either agreed or disagreed.
Yeah, and we made a decision
It's
to
up to you.
walk away from the,
I'm
no,
fine
I'm
with
just,
that.
I'm
And-
just reminding all of
and-
us, we
and
made that
learning-
decision, and while it would be nice to go back to the MSBA, I think what we're seeing right now from the MBLC is, you want to play, you have to play according to our rules.
That's right.
And,
It doesn't work.
and what I'm
And
also
it's
hearing
expensive.
is if it
Sometimes, yeah.
requires the overhead of an OPM and limits vendor choice and adds cost.
Yeah.
And for the folks involved in the school projects are saying that the amount of reimbursement goes mostly to the costs that we wouldn't carry anyways. The time and the incremental benefit isn't worth it. That's fine. We can take the accelerated repair program off the table. Still, I think if before March town meeting, we had bids on all 4 projects,
You mean
Then-
annual town meeting?
annual town meeting,
Okay.
right? We had bids on all 4 projects, then school department, school committee could decide the best way they believe to proceed, present that, whether it's
Based on all the factors.
in the sequencing, right?
Yep.
Of those projects together and give a better image.
Yeah, I mean, the work has to be done. It's really,
Work
to
has
me,
to
a
be
matter
done.
of the scheduling of it and the budgeting of it across. I
Yeah,
mean,
and we're
that's-
trying to suggest something that is the most efficient and therefore the quickest, which reduces the amount of inflation we're gonna see between a number that we think it is today and what it might finally bid.
Yeah, I guess what I'm struggling with is, Al, I appreciate your piece there, but I don't want to tell you what to do. I know you're speaking as a member of the school committee and superintendent, but what I heard was you wanted to do 2. Here's a suggestion, you do 4.
Right.
I guess I'd push it back on you and say, do you want to do 4 or do you want to do,
Well, for the extra 40 grand, we could get all of it done and the roof turns out to be whatever is the price at the time.
And they had to do preliminary look at the roof anyway for structural engineering to make sure they could put the HVAC up. So they've done some of that early,
Yeah,
so.
But we need to do the
So-
HVAC first before you do the roof.
Right,
It's the
so
same story we had before.
finishing them up
That's interesting.
makes sense. I mean, I think.
so you're really not doing the
controlling
roof
with
though?
motion- Right, controlling the motion to ask for basically completion of all the design components with biddable documents by March town meeting feels like a logical application of the funds.
I'd be supportive of that.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, it sounds like,
Same.
we have to take that back to the school committee, whether they're in agreement as a,
Yeah, I mean, the motion, they're gonna listen to this, and they want what is supported by the boards. I mean, this is a collaborative process, and has been, and while as painful as the numbers are, the responsibility we all share has been shared. So we're gonna carry the messaging back, and then we're gonna walk across the street and keep talking
well, and
about
that's my thing.
this.
I think we want to see what comes out, because it's going to be, has to go to school committee, whatever, but do I have, it sounds like, well, I heard 4, I didn't hear Sean, of
Well,
support for.
No, I agree, and I think essentially that's what was being said here. We're just saying, let's make the wording specific to what everybody's agreed
Yeah.
upon was really all.
So I think
we're
it sounds
adding.
like we have an agreement there. You can take that to finance committee and back
Okay.
to the school committee. I would suggest we hold off our vote of support till we, I always want to hear
I
what
would
everyone
rather
else is
go
there.
across the street with your vote of support, just personally. I mean,
So I'll
Well, I
make
think
a
we have a vote of support. The question, yeah, we can go for the vote of support.
For
I
the
just a little
design
bit-
work.
Hesitant because the
Don't
school
be.
committee hasn't.
it's fine.
I'm not hesitant. I'm not, they think.
They're gonna,
Give it-
I
give the
think, I
motion.
think this is a collaborative, I mean, in all seriousness, I
So we
mean,
would,
I know what you're
well,
saying.
what you're saying is we would support this, but if they change it and if finance committee changes it, that's gonna have to come back to us
I
for
would-
a new vote.
I would like,
Right.
I mean, I think our
I
it's
think
like,
we have
it's a,
support for what we talked about, so I'll take that, but I'm just saying that we
it's a
may have to change our
recommendation,
vote.
it's a recommendation that, I mean, I think that's
Put
what
it
I
on the
feel like.
floor
It's a
that we-
recommendation that the motion be to, that the expansion of the scope be,
focused to the
focused on
completion of
design for
drawings.
HVAC, MAAB, and window,
And roof.
design, and roof as needed if it's expanded, you know,
Right.
beyond what's already been done.
So moved.
She moved it. You wanted a second.
Second it.
Chris?
Just to be clear, I'd hear that we don't need to do roof design, it was just more money for windows, is that?
Correct. You don't get a roof design, you basically get a.
It's like a square footage, okay.
So just,
Minus the roof design.
so basically,
amended.
it's what we talked about
Second as
inclusive of
You
windows.
okay, Alan?
And you're okay with that?
Second as amended.
But-
Okay.
Kristen?
So, but you're not taking a vote, you're taking a vote of a recommendation for
Recommendation.
Amber to take back to the school committee.
Correct.
What you were talking about before was your vote of support for the article or not.
Yeah, and I don't
if-
think we
and
can
for
do that yet.
R&R,
until
you're
we
right,
see
you
it.
can't do that.
Right.
Because if you voted 5-0 to support, then it would be
Goes in the
supporting
book.
the article as it.
As it's
Right.
presented,
Right,
right,
Correct.
right.
So we want to see what the motion is, and we want to see
Right.
what the others go
So
through. So I think what we're saying
recommendation
right now is
based
we're
on our
giving you
discussion.
support to take back. Hopefully, we'll get agreement from the other.
So
And we'll
we'll go
vote on
across the
town
street
meeting.
and talk to FinCom, and then we have a school committee meeting Thursday. We should be able to wrap a cohesive discussion out of all of this by the close of that
And
day.
we meet Tuesday,
Right.
next
We
Tuesday.
need a vote
Yeah.
on the recommendation.
Well, we could just do it on town floor if it's a
We
motion.
probably won't get in the book.
Well, I think you're
No,
voting
I
on the
think we
recommendation.
want to vote
The
on
motion
our
that Sean made.
recommendation.
So that she can bring it back.
I would do that, but yes, to the other piece,
Right.
we'll wait to hear the others. We have the 11th to vote. I don't know if that would get in the book. So right now, we'll probably say that
Okay.
we'll vote on town meeting floor. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
5-0.
Thank
They're
you.
probably waiting for you.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this is a helpful discussion.
Okay, anything?
I feel bad we're
flashy?
adjourning now,
Yes.
as Amber goes away.
Well, I gotta go to my next meeting.
I
unless
know,
they
we
finish
never
early.
get to go home this early.
Thank you. Fred, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for everything.
Okay, I think, unless someone else has anything, I don't think we have anything else on our agenda tonight. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second, third.
Okay, all those in favor? Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Westborough TV.
Thank you.
Thank you, Westborough TV. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.